Mother-in-law calls police on my wedding day, accuses someone of stealing her diamond necklace, gets caught, and injures herself trying to re-enter. Hey everyone, so grab some popcorn because I'm about to spill the tea on my super entitled mother-in-law Susan. She's 59 and I'm 29, married to my awesome husband Andrew, who's 30. Let's rewind to a few years back when Andrew and I first met. It all started at the hospital where we both work. Yeah, we're both in the healthcare biz. I'm a nurse and he's a pediatrician. Our love story wasn't exactly a smooth ride from the start. Dating a coworker? Oh boy, that's a whole adventure on its own. We had to sneak glances across the hospital corridors, steal quick conversations during lunch breaks, and try not to get caught by our bosses. Let's just say we weren't exactly supposed to be mixing business with pleasure, but hey, love finds a way, right? After 2 years of this secret but not so secret romance, our close friends definitely knew, Andrew popped the big question. And let me paint this picture for you. A romantic dinner at our favorite restaurant, candlelight, soft music, the works. Out of nowhere, he gets down on one knee with the most gorgeous ring I've ever seen. Of course, I said yes. Cue the happy tears and a flurry of phone calls to our friends and family. Now, fast forward to the moving in phase. Merging two lives wasn't exactly a piece of cake. Picture boxes everywhere, debates over whose IKEA furniture was better, and discovering each other's quirky habits, like Andrew's obsession with organizing his socks by color. Yep, that's real. Despite the occasional hiccup, we created a cozy home, filled with love, laughter, and the occasional friendly argument over whose turn it was to do the dishes. And then, there's Susan. Where do I even start? Susan is your classic helicopter parent. She's been hovering over every aspect of Andrew's life since he was born. Her grip on him is tighter than a vice. Andrew, bless his heart, is the epitome of the dutiful son, always eager to please his mama bear. I'm all for close family bonds, but Susan's brand of love can feel a bit suffocating. She has this uncanny knack for inserting herself into every decision Andrew makes. Big or small, her opinion is like gospel to him. And woe to anyone who dares challenge her authority. She second-guesses everything I do. It's like she's got a radar for detecting any deviation from her idea of perfection. Take our wedding planning, for instance. You'd think it'd be a joyous occasion, but nope. Susan bulldozed her way in, guilt-tripping us and making passive-aggressive comments about how we never have time for family anymore. But the most frustrating part, the way she undermines Andrew's independence. She can't fathom her baby boy growing up and making his own decisions. While I know it comes from a place of love, it's hard not to feel like I'm constantly competing for Andrew's attention and approval. Susan isn't exactly subtle about her disdain for me either. She's got this thing about me not being good enough for her precious son, and boy does she let it show. Once we had her over for dinner. I slaved away in the kitchen, and all she could say was the chicken was dry as a desert. Talk about a punch to the gut. And her snide remarks about my career? Apparently being a nurse doesn't cut it in Susan's book. According to her, Andrew's job as a pediatrician trumps mine. Real classy, right? Oh, and don't even get me started on her thoughtful gifts. Instead of asking what I might like, she gifts me a self-help book on how to impress your mother-in-law. Thanks, but no thanks, Susan. Susan's meddling isn't news to me, though. According to the grapevine, Andrew's relatives, she's been doing this to every girl he's ever brought home. One of his exes even broke it off because of Susan's overbearing presence. But you know what? That didn't faze me much. We were so busy with our crazy schedules that we didn't have time to dwell on Susan's antics. Everything changed when we got engaged. Suddenly, I found myself dealing with her more than ever, and it was far from a walk in the park. From day one, Susan made it clear she wanted a front row seat to all things wedding-related. Dress fittings, venue scouting, menu tastings, you name it, she wanted in. At first, I tried to be diplomatic, including her indecisions and nodding along to her unsolicited opinions. But as weeks went by, it became clear Susan had no intention of taking a back seat. Take the dress dilemma, for instance. I had a vision of finding the perfect gown that made me feel like $1,000,000 and screamed Emily. But Susan had other ideas. She insisted on accompanying me to every bridal boutique, vetoing dress after dress because they didn't meet her lofty standards. My dream dress was secondary to her vision of bridal perfection. Then, there was the venue saga. Andrew and I fell in love with a quaint little barn in the countryside, but Susan had her sights set on something more upscale. Endless debates, passive-aggressive remarks, and compromises later, I felt like I had to settle for second best. And trust me, that's just the tip of the iceberg with Susan's wedding planning antics. So, the whole takeover ordeal started because Susan just had to micromanage every little thing. I'm not exaggerating. Flower arrangements, seating charts, and even the color scheme. You name it, she had to have a say. It got so bad that I started wondering if it was even my wedding anymore, or just a Susan production, directed by Susan, and produced by Susan. And don't even get me started on the honeymoon. Seriously, I was half expecting her to try and tag along on our romantic getaway because, well, she'd already integrated herself into every other aspect of our wedding planning. Why stop now, right? The big day I had been dreaming about ever since Andrew proposed finally arrived. Despite all the chaos leading up to it, I was buzzing with excitement to finally marry the love of my life. I thought nothing could dampen my spirits, not even Susan and her meddling ways. Or so I thought, until Susan swooped in with a bombshell just when I thought we were in the clear. Picture this. I'm all decked out in my bridal attire, nerves and anticipation running high, when Susan bursts into my room in a complete frenzy. And what does she have to say? Her diamond necklace, yeah, you heard that right, a diamond necklace, had mysteriously gone missing. The collective gasp in the room was almost audible as we all tried to wrap our heads around this sudden twist. Susan, eyes wide with panic, insisted that someone had stolen it from her room. Cue the frantic search party, led by none other than Susan herself, looking like a woman possessed. Amidst the chaos, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. So, in a moment of pure desperation, I cautiously suggested to Susan that maybe, just maybe, she had misplaced the necklace. It happens to the best of us, right? Well, Susan didn't take that hypothesis too kindly. She shot me a dagger-like glare and practically spat out, "I'm not a forgetful person, Emily." So much for trying to defuse the situation with a bit of rational thinking. There we were, me trying to reassure Susan that everything would be fine, while simultaneously battling the sinking feeling that this was only the beginning of a wedding day disaster. My bridesmaids rallied around Susan, determined to track down the elusive necklace, but I couldn't help but wonder if this was Susan's way of stealing the spotlight one last time before I walked down the aisle. Just minutes before the ceremony was supposed to start, a few policemen strolled into the venue, looking all serious, and dropped a bombshell of their own. They'd received a call about a stolen diamond necklace, and guess who the suspect was? None other than dear old Susan. I was floored. Who, in their right mind, calls the cops on their own son's wedding day? Talk about a major buzzkill. But there we were, thrust into the midst of a full-blown police investigation, because Susan couldn't find her precious necklace. So I did what any bride would do in my shoes. I tried to defuse the situation as best as I could. I calmly explained to the officers that we were searching for the necklace and couldn't confirm whether it was actually stolen or just misplaced. But of course, Susan wasn't about to let a little thing like reason get in the way of her melodrama. Meanwhile, my family, bless their hearts, swooped in to save the day. They echoed my sentiments and reassured the officers that it was all just a big misunderstanding. After all, what's a wedding without a bit of chaos, right? Despite their best efforts to smooth things over, the tension was palpable. Guests were whispering and shooting suspicious glances at Susan, and I felt like the weight of the world was bearing down on my shoulders. Who needs pre-wedding jitters when you've got a full-blown police interrogation to contend with? As the minutes ticked by and the search for the missing necklace continued, the tension became almost unbearable. Family members scoured every nook and cranny of the venue, their frantic whispers and hurried footsteps echoing off the walls. My wedding ceremony, which was supposed to start on time, was now delayed by an hour. Frustration surged inside me. Here we were, on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and instead of walking down the aisle, I was stuck playing detective in a real-life whodunit. I mean, who steals a necklace on someone's wedding day? Just as I was on the verge of throwing in the towel, a ray of hope appeared in the form of my 8-year-old nephew. With a triumphant grin, he bounded over and announced that he'd found the missing necklace. My heart skipped a beat. Where had he found it? The bombshell. He'd seen my mother-in-law Susan slip the necklace into her purse. My mind reeled. Could it be true? Had Susan really stooped so low as to steal her own necklace on my wedding day? Before I could wrap my head around it, my brother and mother entered the room, followed closely by Susan. With a sinking feeling, I mustered the courage to confront her. "Did you find the necklace?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. To my shock, Susan shook her head, her expression a mask of innocence. "No," she replied, her tone betraying none of the guilt I expected to hear. Was my nephew mistaken? Had he seen someone else slip the necklace into their purse? As I cast a weary glance at Susan, my suspicions grew stronger. She had been the one making a fuss about the missing necklace from the start, and now, with her denial ringing in my ears, something wasn't right. The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. All eyes were on Andrew as he strode purposefully toward his mom, determination etched into his face. Then, in a move that shocked us all, he reached out and snatched the purse from her grasp. With a swift motion, Andrew extracted the missing diamond necklace. So there Andrew was, holding up the necklace for everyone to see. "Don't worry, folks," he announced, his voice crystal clear and steady. "We found the necklace." But Andrew wasn't done yet, not even close. With the necklace swinging from his fingers like a piece of incriminating evidence, he locked eyes with his mom. And then, he just let loose. He accused her of stealing the spotlight and trying to ruin the wedding, his words slicing through the air like a knife. Susan looked like a deer caught in the headlights. She stammered, protested, and insisted she had no idea how the necklace ended up in her purse, pleading for innocence. But Andrew wasn't having any of it, and neither were the rest of us. In a move that left us all slack-jawed, Andrew declared he was done with her shenanigans for the day. He called in security and asked them to escort Susan out of the venue. I'll never forget the look on Susan's face as the security guards led her away. It was a mix of shock, disbelief, and maybe even a hint of shame. For the first time since I'd known her, she seemed small and vulnerable, stripped of the bravado that was her trademark. As Andrew and I exchanged vows and finally became husband and wife, I felt a bittersweet relief wash over me. The weight of Susan's presence had lifted, replaced by the overwhelming joy of starting our new life together. Sure, the ceremony ran over an hour late, and we were exhausted from all the drama. But as we exchanged rings and sealed our love with a kiss, none of that mattered. All that mattered was us, Andrew and me, ready to face whatever came our way. Just when we thought the chaos was over, the reception took an unexpected turn. The party was in full swing, guests were laughing and dancing, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. That is, until we heard a commotion outside the venue. We were informed by the staff and rushed to check it out. My 59-year-old mother-in-law, Susan, was attempting to scale the venue wall in a desperate bid to crash the party. And if that wasn't enough, she injured her leg in the process. Needless to say, Andrew and I were both stunned and horrified. Being the caring son he is, Andrew rushed to Susan's side. She was screaming in pain, clutching her injured leg as tears streamed down her face. The staff called an ambulance, and when the paramedics arrived, they assessed Susan's injury and determined it was just a minor sprain. Nothing serious, but Susan, ever the drama queen, insisted it was more serious and demanded immediate medical attention. Andrew and I were torn between wanting to help and feeling like we'd had enough drama for one day. Ultimately, we decided to err on the side of caution. So, Andrew asked his friend to take Susan to the hospital, much to her dismay. She protested and yelled, demanding to know why Andrew wasn't coming with her. But Andrew stood firm, explaining that we needed to get back to the reception and that she'd be in good hands with his friend. As the night went on and the music filled the air, I couldn't shake the feeling that we might have been too harsh. Sure, Susan's behavior was out of line, but was kicking her out and sending her to the hospital really the right move? Shouldn't we have shown more compassion? After the wedding fiasco, Andrew and Susan had a major showdown when she was dropped off at her house. She wasn't thrilled about it, to say the least. Fast forward to the next day, and Andrew and I rolled back to our apartment, thinking the drama was finally behind us. But who was waiting for us outside? Yep, Susan. And she didn't look too pleased. Before we could say hello, Andrew cut right to the chase. "Not now, Mom," he said, his voice tired. "I'm really tired." But instead of backing off, Susan decided to push back. "Oh, so now you don't have time for your mother," she retorted, dripping with passive aggressiveness. And just like that, we were thrust into another round of Susan's endless drama. We managed to wrangle ourselves inside, hoping for a moment's peace, but Susan wasn't having it. She started yammering on, not even pausing for a breath. I tried to hint that now wasn't the time for a heart-to-heart, but she ignored me. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, Andrew reached his breaking point. He exploded, letting loose all the pent-up frustration and anger. "If you loved me so much, Mom, then why did you try to ruin my wedding?" he shouted, his voice echoing off the walls of our tiny apartment. Then he hit her with a real gut punch. "You knew damn well that Emily bent over backward to make you happy, but it was never enough for you." The truth came out, raw and unfiltered. Susan's refusal to own up to her actions only added fuel to the fire. She kept making excuses, claiming she had no idea how the necklace ended up in her purse, or that maybe she simply forgot. To top it off, she started shedding tears, as if that would somehow erase everything that had happened. But Andrew wasn't buying it. So there you have it. Was kicking Susan out and sending her to the hospital the right move? Maybe, maybe not. But one thing's for sure. It was a wedding we won't soon forget. All right, let's make this longer and more casual with a bit more detail. Andrew looked her straight in the eye and told her he was beyond disappointed in her behavior. He made it clear that it was going to take some serious time and effort for him to move past this betrayal. Finally, Andrew reached his breaking point. With a heavy heart, he asked Susan to leave. At first, she dug in her heels, refusing to budge. But when she realized that neither Andrew nor I were about to back down, she reluctantly left, shooting us one last glare before storming off and saying that we were going to regret this later. So it's been a hot minute since my last update, and let me tell you, things have been eerily quiet on the Susan front. After Andrew and I gave her the boot, I was fully expecting her to blow up our phones or show up unannounced at our doorstep. But, to my surprise, there wasn't a peep from her. Talk about a plot twist, am I right? We were starting to get a little worried, to be honest. I mean, love her or hate her, Susan was never one to shy away from drama. So when she suddenly went radio silent, it definitely raised a few eyebrows, but just when we thought the storm had finally blown over, guess who decided to make a grand entrance? Yep, you guessed it, Susan. And let me tell you, she had news. Big news. Apparently, after everything that went down, she'd had an epiphany or something. She strolls into our house like she owns the place and drops the bombshell that she's moving to an assisted living facility. Now, I don't know about you, but I was completely floored by this revelation. I mean, here's the same woman who tried to scale a wall to crash our wedding, and now she's talking about moving to an assisted living facility. Talk about a 180-degree turn. Andrew, bless his heart, tries to talk some sense into her. He's all like, "What are you doing, Mom? You don't have to do this. We'll figure something out." But Susan, being Susan, insists that this is what's best for her. She goes on about how she'll have company and won't be all alone, yada yada yada. And just like that, she drops another bombshell. She's already leased out her house and she'll be moving out this weekend. I don't know about you, but I was reeling from the news. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under us. Andrew, being the stand-up guy that he is, offers to drive her himself. But of course, Susan's got to go and play the guilt card, saying she doesn't want to be a burden or whatever. Classic Susan move, am I right? After she left, Andrew and I sat down and had a heart-to-heart. He admitted that he didn't quite buy Susan's whole story. So, being the detective that I am, I reached out to a friend of Susan's who happens to be a realtor. And wouldn't you know it, she confirmed that Susan was indeed serious about this whole move. We were both feeling a mix of emotions, sadness, confusion, maybe even a hint of relief. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not like we wanted Susan out of our lives completely. But after everything that had happened, maybe a little distance wouldn't be such a bad thing. But still, it's hard not to feel a pang of guilt knowing that things had come to this. After all, she's family, and seeing her go through something like this was tough to swallow. But at the end of the day, we knew we had to respect her decision, no matter how hard it was to accept. Andrew and I had psyched ourselves up for what we thought was going to be a smooth transition to the assisted living facility for Susan. I mean, we were ready to make the best of a less-than-ideal situation, and maybe even squeeze in a little quality family time along the way. But let me tell you, things did not go according to plan, not even close. As we piled into the car, Andrew and I were trying to keep the mood light and breezy. We cracked jokes, sang along to the radio, anything to distract ourselves from the awkwardness of the situation. But Susan, bless her heart, was as quiet as a mouse. When we finally pulled up to the facility, I could feel the tension in the air thickening by the second. We exchanged nervous glances as we stepped through the doors, bracing ourselves for whatever lay ahead. But nothing, not even our wildest imaginations, could have prepared us for what happened next. You see, when we approached the reception desk to check Susan in, we were met with blank stares and confused expressions. It turns out there was no booking in Susan's name zip, zilch, nada. Susan, of course, was adamant that she'd made the booking herself and that the guy on the phone had confirmed everything. But as it turned out, there had been a major miscommunication. The guy had only confirmed a visit, not a booking. Andrew, bless his soul, tried to keep his cool as he grilled Susan about how she could possibly have made such a colossal blunder. But Susan, being Susan, started to unravel right before our eyes. Tears welled up in her eyes as she admitted that she didn't know what to do next. She'd already gone and rented out her apartment, thinking everything was all set. And now here she was, faced with the harsh reality that things weren't going according to plan. I glanced at Andrew and I could see the gears turning in his head. Without a word, I knew exactly what he was thinking. And when he turned to me and gave me that look, I nodded in silent agreement. And then, in a move that caught us all off guard, Andrew extended an olive branch to Susan. He told her that she could stay with us until we figured out a solution. So yes, we brought her back home, and I don't know how long she's going to stay with us. I just hope there's less drama than what I'm expecting at the moment. Hi guys, this is my last update, so buckle down. Living with Susan Waswell, let's just say it was everything you'd expect and then some. Andrew and I were just starting out as newlyweds, and the last thing we needed was Susan cramping our style. I mean, we had a honeymoon to look forward to in just 2 short weeks, and the last thing I wanted was to come back to find her still camped out in our living room. So I hatched a plan. I have this friend who's always traveling for work, and wouldn't you know it, her company was sending her off to another state for a couple of months. And get this, her apartment. So, the apartment was going to be sitting empty the whole time. Talk about perfect timing, right? I reached out to my friend, explained the situation, and guess what? She was totally cool with helping out. I mean, who wouldn't want to lend a hand to a friend in need, right? I pitched the idea to Andrew, and he was all for it. It made perfect sense. By the time my friend would be back from her trip, Susan's lease would be up, and we'd finally be free from her clutches once and for all. Now, getting Susan to agree to the plan was a whole different story. At first, she was hesitant, saying she didn't want to impose or intrude on a stranger space, but I reassured her that the apartment was nearby and that she could visit us whenever she wanted. After a bit of back and forth, she finally caved and agreed to give it a shot. So just like that, we packed up all of Susan's stuff and moved her into my friend's place. Sure, it was a bit of a hassle, but it was nothing compared to the relief we felt knowing that the end was finally in sight. For now, at least, the Susan saga has come to a close, and let me tell you, it feels like a weight has been lifted off our shoulders. Sure, there's still